Hello, this is a presentation I prepared for the Psychedelic Science Conference 2025 in Denver. Thank Rick Doblin for the invitation to the senior panel. I'm sure psychedelics had something to do with how all of us made it to here. I particularly thank Stanley Krippner for being a co-author on this. This is the first time that Stan and I have appeared on a stage together in spite of our almost 50-year friendship. Now, I didn't invite Stan to be on the paper in order to qualify for the senior panel, although it certainly helps. Stan first did psychedelics in 1962 at Harvard University, so probably long before many of you were even born. The reason I invited Stan was first because I wasn't sure I wanted to make a trip up from Brazil 2 months in a row, but it turns out it works out. Here I am. But the reason I invited Stan was Stan wrote the preface forward to this book upon which the presentation is based today. So Stan was the obvious person to invite for this. But the reason that I invited Stan to write the preface goes back almost 45 years. 1980, Stan invited me to join him and some Bay Area psychiatrists and psychologists to visit with Maria Sabina and Waldo de Jimenez. And it was in this opportunity that I came to know about the entheogenic use of mushrooms and had an incredible experience. You can read something about our journey there in Stan's memoirs. We wrote a short article on it, Maria Sabina, Wise Lady of the Mushrooms. I didn't get to do mushrooms with Maria Sabina, but with one of her initiates. And I had an incredible experience. It was a period of my life when I was meditating regularly, and I spent the night meditating, moved into golden light. The next day, I was beaming, I was radiant. And I knew that along the way, I was going to study the psychedelics and how it was that they healed. So this presentation, this book upon which the presentation is based, really is an outgrowth of Stanley's experiences with me. And I really appreciate them. And I'm sure many of you have also had positive impact on your life from Stan. So what I'm going to talk about today is a small part of this book. And I want to basically present a comparative analysis of traditional entheogenic healing. Instead of my usual approach to how is it that the clinical sciences of psychedelics can inform our understanding of entheogenic practices, today I want to go the other way around and say a scientific study of entheogenic healing practices can advise our use of them in clinical practice. And so the book is organized around a similar structure for each chapter. How are the healers and patients prepared? What's the context of the ritual? What are the ritual techniques? What are the uses of the visions, the altered states? How does healing happen? What are the conditions, the dynamics, and the integration processes? And I have found a remarkably similar commonalities in the patterns of entheogenic healings across these traditional and Mestizo groups. And I'm going to propose that this reveals the evolved psychology of ritual healing. And I will place these commonalities in contemporary entheogenic healing in the context of hominid ritualization or ancient evolved healing roots, the practices of shamanism and foraging societies, and how it is that they organize healing as a consequence of ritual adaptations. I'll particularly focus on mimesis, the use of imitation and song and dance as part of the healing processes, and look at how the preparation for the ritual healing engages what has been called pivotal mental states, these acute crises that result in elevated 5-HT2A levels that enable a variety of different kinds of healing responses to occur. I'll also place the shamanic and the entheogenic healing in the context of dreams and dream time and the induction of altered states through normal processes, and point out how all of these evoke endogenous healing processes. So the first two chapters I'll talk about are written by Jesus Gonzalez and Genaro Guziezola, and another one by Osiris Gonzalez and Maria de Carmen Masuil. And they look at the use of mushrooms in contemporary Mexican indigenous cultures. They share a lot of commonalities. Preparation were with purification, steam baths, abstaining from sex, engaging in fasting. The context is a night-long ceremony, by preference in nature, and it involves a family group, a community group, or even inter-community organizations. The techniques invoke the songs as a sacred language for healing. The power of the mushrooms comes through the songs. Chanting, whistling, dancing, and percussion are part of this mimetic suite of engagement with the psychedelics. The visions are for the patient to see the mistakes that disrupted their balance, as well as to see what needs to be done to restore health. So the healer may also get visions, but it's the patient's visions that tell us what needs to be done. A wide variety of conditions are treated, physical illnesses as well as emotional problems, resolving social conflicts, familial conflicts, sometimes characterized as supernatural problems, but often just seen as basically conflicts between members of a family, members of a residence, members of a community, or even between communities. And this integration involves a seclusion period. No sex, no alcohol, and a commitment to change one's behaviors and seeing how it is that that needs to be done. Also look at two chapters, one by Jorgelina Reynoso on Santa Rosa, cannabis, another by Antonella Fagetti on the Virgin Seed, the Morning Glories. And with the Santa Rosa, the cannabis is eaten as part of the ceremony, even as part of preparation for the ceremony. Healers and patients undergo a special diet, sexual abstinence, and the healers particularly need to pay attention to their own emotional state. The context is a nighttime ritual. It can be a community-wide ritual, a familial ritual, or some subgroup of the community. They sing sacred songs, which are thought to activate the Santa Rosa. They dance. These songs and the dancing are thought to open the life force, and they make offerings to the ancestors, who they see as the source of the healing power. The visions are for diagnosis and to show you how to heal, what needs to be done. Conditions are quite varied, including envy, fear, depression, curses, alcoholism, general well-being of the community, the harvest, etc. And the integration period involves dreams, special diets, sexual abstinence, changing behaviors, and even engaging in idea about what it is that you're going to do different about your life. The virgin seed, preparation with sexual abstinence, isolation at times. The context, again, nighttime and darkness with family and community. The techniques include the use of a group of fasters who accompany the patient, and their self-healing is thought to involve the visions that show the circumstances causing the disease and what it is that one needs to do to heal. They often feel that the seeds make the person speak. It's a voice speaking through the person that tells them where the problem came from, with the dreams showing the circumstances and what it is that needs to be done to heal. Diverse problems are addressed: curses, soul fright, loss, contamination, etc. In the integration period, focusing on dreams, diet, sexual abstinence, avoiding strangers, doing saunas, and avoiding contamination. We have 3 chapters about the mescaline-containing cacti. Stacy Schaefer writes about the Huichárika, Joseph Calabrese about the Native American Church, and Fanny Charisi and Alfredo Navarez about the use of San Pedro in Peru. The Peyote Maracachi singers, part of this arduous pilgrimage for weeks at times into the desert to find the cactus, a period in which they engage in extensive fasting, austerities, sexual abstinence. Eventually, a nighttime collective ritual in which the songs they're singing is so central that the healers are called singers. The songs, the drumming, and the dancing are thought to activate the peyote. The visions come from the spirits and provide self-diagnosis. And the conditions that they address are not typically what we might think of as a disease or illness, but rather to remove problems, restore equilibrium, address life problems, figure out your career, address lack of fertility, and to be better or more effective at your work. The integration period includes the long journey home, as well as dreams that might occur during that time, and then purification rituals at the end, including a ritual to untie the souls of the members of the group who travel together. The Native American Church, once again, an all-night ceremony with the community group. The peyote songs are thought to activate the peyote. The drumming does as well. And the pharmacological effects are understood as affecting the emotions, facilitating cognitive changes, and inducing the visionary self-reflective states that give one insight into the roots of one's problem. And peyote is thought to operate as a voice that talks to the person in a dreamlike condition, providing insights. In the NAC context, addiction and identity problems are central. And one of the central aspects of the healing has to do with using the peyote to facilitate coping with societal injustice. And in particular, to use the Native American church ethos to reorient one's life around the expectations of the Native American church. The integrative period involves these self-reflective states, engaging in higher order mental processes, and living one's life in the NAC support group, where spirituality and positive role models giving you orientation, particularly for juveniles, young adults who are suffering from addiction, identity problems, alienation. So basically a reorientation of the self and identity within the Native American church, what Calabrese refers to as a therapeutic emplotment. The San Pedro all-night ceremonies, whistling, songs, incantations, rattles, a lot of ritual artifacts involving both indigenous and Christian items, and the effects of the San Pedro, together with the use of tobacco, invokes purging that is seen as part of the cleansing mechanism. The visions, again, to see the cause of your problems, and there is reason to believe that the biological effects invoke the general adaptation syndrome and activation of the autonomic nervous system in ways that lead to a stress resolution transition. The conditions treated are not so much particular illnesses, but unfortunate in life, and therefore to find success in life and love and work and interpersonal issues, and it may be used to address things like sorcery and hexes. The integration is a reunion the morning following the ceremony, a period of time in which the florecimientos done at the end of the ceremony, and putting perfumes on the people are done again, and they're prohibited for bathing for 24 hours so that this powerful aromatic scent remains with you to reinforce the overall psychological, emotional changes of the ceremony. Ayahuasca traditions here among the Kamëntsá by Alejandro Martín Valencia and Luis Fernando Agreda, the Shipibo-Konibo by Pedro Favarón y Shonon Benzo, and then the vegetalista traditions of Peru by Eugenia Huichol. Here we see the use of the same principles of preparation, avoiding foods and fasting, seeking mental, physical, and emotional balance, a nighttime context that may be just the patient, but normally involves a broader group. The techniques involve purging provoked by the yahe, the ayahuasca, and once again, the use of the mimetic techniques of music, songs, incantations, prayers, treatment of a variety of conditions, physical diseases as well as emotional problems, mental illness as well as spiritual problems, and addressing interpersonal and family conflicts as also part of the resolution process. During the post-session integration, no sex, no alcohol, avoiding conflictive relationships, staying away from late night activities, and focus on changing one's behavior and one's relationships that are going to undo the problems that led to the imbalances that caused the illness. Shipibo-Konibo, once again, preparation with sexual abstinence and diet, cleansing negative emotions, particularly releasing anger and resentment, a nighttime ceremony in which, in this case, only the healer consumes the ayahuasca, not the patient. The songs are thought to produce these regenerative vibrations and healing energies that are at the core of healing and creating a new emotional state for the patient. And the visions provide the medicinal songs, the visionary meanings, and the interpretations that later come in the healer's dreams. So the healer is there getting the information that the patient needs to change. Conditions are more traditional: envy, sorcery, evil, purification of negative emotions, overcoming consequences of fear, of trauma, and traditional shamanic issues such as soul recovery or overcome from drug abuse. The integration is basically seeking spiritual help to realign one's life course, to calm one's body, to recover health through a faith in the healer and a humility about one's condition. And it's emphasized that the bond of trust of the patient with the healer is key to the overall treatment process. Changing behaviors and overcoming the ignorance that caused illness in the first place is part of the post-integration period in which one figures out how to amend the faults that one has and become a different kind of person. Vegetalismo in Peru, once again, fasting, sexual abstinence, purifying with the plant diets, the dietas. Context is an overnight group, often much more eclectic and not so familiar or communitarian. Techniques involve not only the use of songs, but other things like fans, various forms of purification, including using tobacco to blow on the body, using of crystals, sucking on parts of the body to remove evil, to remove sorcery. And the visions are thought to strengthen the body and protect from sorcery, but also to reveal the cause of illness and to enhance one's intuition to get insight into what caused the problem in the first place. So the treatments focus on imbalances that could come from diverse sources, from stress, from fear, from traumas, and also to release one's negative thoughts and emotions, particularly, again, getting over anger and resentment that creates these emotional imbalances. And the integration period, once again, focuses on dreams to reveal the lessons from the sessions, avoidance of sex, and focusing on changing one's emotions, changing one's self-perceptions, and changing one's relationships, developing positive ones and eliminating the negative ones from one's life. So what we see as commonalities in the entheogenic healing practices across these diverse traditions is a period of preparation with sexual abstinence and diet, in which the emotional state is important, nighttime group gathering, techniques of singing, drumming, dancing, and music, the altar states to access the powers of the entheogen and provide the cure, and to provide self-diagnosis. Conditions are a wide range of life problems. We could say biopsychosocial and spiritual. And integration is focusing on your personal and familial dynamics, staying away from other people, restricted diet, no sex, focusing on dreams, and focusing on change. So to optimize entheogenic healing, I think we need to use these cross-cultural patterns because they tell us something about the biological roots of our endogenous healing responses, an evolved psychology of set and setting. And shamanism certainly is part of this set of ritual healing processes that are based upon the innate disposition that shape mood, personality, cognition, and social relations under the effects of psychedelics. So when we look at shamanism as an evolved capacity, and as part of the traditional healing practices of foraging societies, it was a nighttime reunion. The evolution of shamanism from a hominid baseline involved dancing and singing and drumming. The shamanic development engages the 5-HT2A stress response. The altered states of consciousness are not only part of the rituals, but also dreaming processes, and they're thought to activate innate intelligences and the endogenous healing responses. Hominid ritualizations, which I think are the roots of shamanism, is a nighttime reunification with group chorsing and chanting, collective drumming on tree trunks that provides a display that protects the group, elicits endogenous healing responses, and creates positive emotional synchrony. I think this is at the core of why nighttime rituals of the group are core to entheogenic healing. Shamanic evolution involved the development of the capacities of mimesis based in mirror neurons that provide an expressive symbolic system and is used to express emotions and meanings in songs and chants and dance. So shamanism exemplifies this in collective dancing, drumming, clapping, and also in the engagement with animal powers as part of the struggle against evil spirits. I would propose that we see mimesis as being a neural technology in which music and dance evokes endogenous opioids and stimulates other neurotransmitter systems. The idea that there is a crisis and illness as part of shamanic selection and formation is widespread. In this article with Ari Bauer and Charles Rayson, I've looked at this idea of pivotal mental states as part of shamanic development. And the shamans exhibit those kinds of symptoms resembling psychosis and hysteria, and engage in solitary fasting, sexual abstinence, and austerities. We know that the chronic stress with acute stressors triggers the 5-HT2A response, and shamans are doing things such as social isolation, fasting, sleep deprivation, and pain in order to get to these pivotal mental states that provide mechanisms for psychological transformation when demands exceed the self resources. So it enhances the ability to deal with stress, mediates psychological transformations by providing rapid and deep learning. It elevates cortical and behavioral plasticity and allows a greater creativity and sensitivity to new information so that we can change. One of the ways in which shamans did this transformation was during the death and rebirth experience, in which they came to assume the powers of animals. So they inquired through our capacities for animal identification and innate intelligence, a self-empowerment that used animals as natural symbols and consequently as models for changing one's attitudes and behaviors in life. There's also the use of the social intelligence, in which we are capable of incorporating the behaviors, ideas, qualities, identities of others, normal socialization process. So shamanism evoked these two innate intelligences in order to provoke self-transformation. So I think there's a lot of evidence that not only does shamanism engage what Gardner referred to as the innate intelligences, particularly things such as theory of mind for spirit communication, the animal or naturalist intelligence for animal identities, spiritual intelligence, existential intelligence. But basically, you find all of these in shamanism and well as in other altered states. So understanding non-pharmacological altered states as a natural set and setting for the engagement with entheogenic healing, I think is very important. They evoke the pivotal mental responses through fasting, isolation, sexual abstinence, sleeplessness. Music and dance stimulate neurotransmitters and the endorphins. Overnight ritual will incorporate dreams as a natural process of engaging these innate intelligences, as well as providing us with information consolidation and virtual scenario construction possibilities in order to find ways to resolve trauma and conflicts. So like altered states, dreams and overnight sessions ought to be a natural set and setting for psychedelic therapy. We have a variety of endogenous healing responses. Dramatic displays of the shaman evokes parasympathetic, hypnotic, and placebo responses, so we can view this as an extra pharmacological effect. And music also evokes endogenous healing mechanisms, including emotional states, stress reduction, inducing emotional bonding and emotional synchronization and harmony, as well as evoking a variety of inherently healing neurological responses such as endorphins, serotonin, and dopamine. So when we look at the correspondences of traditional entheogenic healing with the evolved psychology, we have the context that is overnight, reflecting the hominid nighttime reunification with drumming, dancing, chorusing, that has adaptive functions of unification and protection. The preparation with dietary and sexual restrictions that override natural drives and lead to the pivotal mental states that enhance serotonin 5-HT2A. The mimetic techniques of singing and dancing and expressive performance that enhance the endogenous opioids. The visionary functions that are a product of both the pivotal mental states and mimesis that reveal unconscious dynamics and innate symbolic processes that integrate with the dreams. Ritual healing, eliciting a variety of endogenous healing responses, as well as a biopsychosocial dynamic of symbolic integration with the new mindset that is evoked by the ritual. An integration with community enclosure, restricted social contact, diet, sexual restrictions, but in particular, changing attitudes, behavior, and social relations. The real healing can come after the ceremony as well. So I originally outlined some of these ideas, shamanic ritual as best practices in this article, Shamanic Guidelines for Psychedelic Medicine. Shamanic best practices would include things such as the preparatory set that's going to enhance the susceptibility to altered states through austerities, fasting, sexual abstinence. The overnight communal ritual that's going to enhance access to the unconscious and the dream capacities, as well as the use of the mimetic capacities to synchronize the brain to enhance emotional harmony and to provide a connection with others. So the set should be an expectation of certain kinds of altered states that I have not had much time to elaborate on here, but in the context of shamanism, these are the death and rebirth experiences, the soul flight, and the animal powers that come from an animal transformation. I see all of these as engaging innate intelligences, particularly what has been called presentational symbolism, and in the case of relating to the animals, a way in which we can become more powerful by incorporating animal powers to expand our identity and sense of self. So in conclusion here, when we look at the commonalities in entheogenic healing, they correspond to an evolved psychology of ritual healing. And the implications are really simple here. These cross-cultural similarities indicate that what people are doing in ritual settings is not something that is basically a culturally arbitrary set of religious beliefs and practices. Rather, what the cross-cultural similarities tell us is that this is not from culture. Culture may maintain the traditions around these ritual practices, but in essence, the cross-cultural similarities say it's not culture, it's biological bases. And so these biological bases for these entheogenic practices then provide us with a set of guidelines about how to best adapt to our own innate evolved psychology. And endogenous psychology that is also practiced through the ritual healing techniques used by contemporary indigenous and mestizo cultures. So the fact that they come from a variety of different cultures and all show the same pattern tells us that they have universal applicability. Now, of course, this may raise the question for you, are we not engaging in some kind of cultural appropriation if we're going to take the practices used in other cultures? If you take the chants from the Huichárika, yeah, that's cultural appropriation. If you take, the songs from the vegetalistas, that sounds like might be considered cultural appropriation, unless they've already been commercialized and are being sold in Peru. But if we take patterns of behavior that are not specific to a single culture, but rather general to many different cultures, then I think that the accusation of appropriation is really not appropriate. What we are doing is basically using our studies of other cultures to discover something about our own indigenous ancient practices and our own endogenous healing dynamics. So for instance, is using a drum cultural appropriation? No. The use of drum in healing ceremonies is virtually universal, at least some form of percussion. So the idea that these practices have a universal distribution and a universal applicability, I think, gives us a fair basis to say, even though these practices are used by indigenous cultures, they are not being appropriated from indigenous cultures. It was the scientific study of indigenous cultures that revealed to us something about our own innate psychology and how to best adapt to that innate psychology in the context of ritual healing ceremonies. So the ritual commonalities then give us guidelines for optimizing psychedelic healing practices. Thank you.